Hello everybody and welcome back to Kerbal Space Program, where we're almost ready to begin our colonization of the Jool system. Our colonies are already there and are about ready to land, but we have a couple of problems, and I'd like to go over those really quickly here. So let's hop into the tracking station and let's go ahead and load up our multi-outpost ship here that is currently orbiting Lathe. There's a couple of problems here that we'll need to solve with I guess we could call it a resupply mission, but we don't really need to resupply so much as we need to fix two problems in total. So the first problem that I would like to discuss is actually one that we've already talked about, the atmospheric reentry in Lathe. So we can just use parachutes for that, right? That's the plan there. We're going to enter as... Well, we're going to enter in a fairly controlled manner and use our remaining fuel to slow down enough to use parachutes. That's the idea there. But we've got another problem. And that problem is the fact that if we go in here, we can see we have a 0.53 thrust to weight ratio over Lathe. Now, that's not a problem for Lathe because we can use atmospheric braking, right? But it does become a problem when we realize, let me just set Lathe as our target here, when we realize that the at sea level gravity of Lathe is 0.8 G. Then we come out to Tylo and we realize 0.8 G. This means that while we're fine for Vol, and we're fine for Pull, and we're fine for Bop, we are not fine for Tylo. We're going to require more thrust to weight ratio in order to powered land on Bop. Bop has no atmosphere, so we need to have a powered landing. So we're going to have to send out a couple of things, right? First thing we're going to need to send is parachutes to attach onto here. And then once we have that, we're going to need to send additional engine power that's going to be over Tylo. So we can kind of do this in two stages, right? But I'm going to fire them both off at one time. So let's head back to the Space Center and let's begin design on what this is going to look like. We need to deliver only a couple of things. We're going to need to run some quick tests on thrust to weight ratio though. So we'll need to determine exactly how much we want in terms of parachutes and in terms of engines to strap on, right? So we'll hop into the VAB here. And we're going to have to run a couple of quick tests. Everything else out there will be fine. We just need to get these two worlds dealt with. So let's go ahead and open up really quickly here. Let's see here. The Jool multi-outpost is obviously too much, but we could simply... Well, we could grab the Gilly Eve outpost. This will be fine. This is functionally the same thing, except we're going to ditch the heat shields out here. We're definitely not going to be bringing the heat shields. So, yeah, we've got these parachutes here. In fact, let's just go ahead... Oh, I didn't actually mean to save that, but whatever. Let's go ahead and open not the Gilly Eve outpost, but the Ike outpost. This is more representative of what we have, right? This is basically the same thing. So, we need to determine what do we need at this point over Jool Tylo in order to have thrust to weight ratio over 1. So we're probably going to need some landing engines. Something like quad twitches. That puts us at 0.66 with a max of 0.89. So that's not enough. Okay. I mean, ditching the Poodle and bringing a mainsail could potentially do the trick, but I'd like it to be radially mounted engines. That would be the best way to do it. Let's see here. Cubs are 32 kilonewtons versus Twitch's 16. So this is double the thrust. So something along the lines of this would put us up to 0.79. Okay. That would put us at 0.92. And this would put us at 1.04. Noted. Now, most of our horizontal braking will be fine. So, real quick here. I'm not going to save this. I'm just going to put this out on the pad. And I want to put this over Tylo real quick. And I want to set our position over Tylo. I don't want to set us into an orbit. I want to look at what it would be like if we had a... Say we're at like 30-ish kilometers over the surface, and we just kill our horizontal velocity. I'm not sure if we're going to have enough in our nuclear engine to fully kill our horizontal velocity. Actually, let's set this orbit first. So we'll set this over Tylo. We'll just set our orbit. And then let's see what our orbital speed is and what our altitude is. Okay, so this is 80 kilometers. 2,000 is our orbital speed. Noted. That's rather a lot. Let's bump this orbit down slightly. This is a minimum safe. Okay. So 45 kilometers is considered minimum safe. And that's at about 2,100 delta V. Noted. So then we can set this with our altitude being about this height. That's fine. We don't want to ease to ground. Okay. So this hypothetical landing here. There we go. This is Kerbal? This is Kerbal. Hang on a moment. We wanted this to be Tylo. There we go. We'll set that position. That makes more sense. Fantastic. For some reason, I thought we were already on Tylo. But let's go ahead and do something like this. Of course, this is not exactly realistic, but I want to see what this DV here would be. And this is saying about 260. That's not so bad. Although, I think this may be a little broken. Actually, maybe not. So we do something like this, right? Yeah, this is a little bit broken. And that might be because we just, like, teleported here, right? That's a possibility. And it also might not be quite accurate on what it thinks this length is. This is going down at more than 1 second per second. Okay. Yeah, I think this is a little bit broken here. So we've got 72 seconds of burn here. The question is this actually enough? So I'm just going to bring this down a little bit. Yeah, we can't go any further than that. And we're obviously going to impact the surface, right? I'm more feeling out how much delta V this is going to need. The thrust to weight is the primary problem here. We do require additional thrust to weight here. So this Poodle engine isn't going to cut it. That's very, very clear. And yes, we're going to crash into the surface here. We are going to revert this. But I wanted to feel that out. So we're going to revert that out. That was a simulated launch there, of course. Not even a launch. It was completely simulated. So we're going to go back to the vehicle assembly. I think that the idea for the strap-on boosters isn't going to be helpful. We can't really manipulate this stuff in orbit, though. So that's going to be interesting. As far as delivering the parachutes go, that's going to be easy enough. So we would be looking at potentially like a mainsail here. The gravity of Tylo is quite high, right? And that's only 864 meters per second. It's good thrust to weight, but we might be short on fuel for that. So I think we're going to have to potentially revisit the Tylo outpost. Now, we were thinking already about potentially doing like a station in orbit around Jewel. So we could send in a separate flight just to Tylo with a redesigned lander. I think that makes some sense. So let's go ahead and put back the Poodle for right now. And I want to put on the parachutes that we were talking about doing. So that would be like the Mark 16 XL. And we would have 4 of these. I'm not too concerned about the height of them right now. That should be fine. And then I was also going to put on 4 drogue chutes. So we can just do something kind of like this for the time being. I'm actually going to place them like that. Okay, cool. And we're going to put this out on the pad. And I just want to make sure that our parachutes are going to be fine here. So we can do a parachute delivery out to Tylo. We can have one of our outposts not actually land, and it will enter orbit around Jewel and become a station there. And then we're going to have to send a separate one to Tylo with a redesigned lander that is quite a bit beefier. Quite a bit beefier. That Tylo landing is going to be really interesting, actually. I'm not sure how we're going to pull that one off just yet. So for right now, we want to put this in orbit over Lathe, and this again will be reverted. I just want to double check here. And we should probably lower this semi-major axis as well. Okay, this is minimum safe value here. Looks good. Apparently it is very dark right now. Let's just go ahead and pull this guy down, and we're going to try a test entry here. This is going to be somewhere around... Wait, we're not at retrograde. That would help. Okay, let's bring this around to retrograde. And bring this down. 50 kilometers is where the atmosphere starts. So I'm going to put it at about 20. Like that. Cool. We're going to stay retrograde. And we can continue to burn here, even though our thrust to weight is not high enough to land on, right? But that's fine. Man, it's dark. It is, like, super dark. Hi, Jewel. It is really, really dark, but that'll change here in a moment. What I'm mostly looking to test is... which parachutes are which here? These are the drogues. Okay. What I'm mainly looking to test here is how does this re-entry and landing speed go? So around we go. We're definitely picking up a lot of heat for being this early in the descent. I didn't expect that. We're slowing down nicely, though. If we see heat gauges, we can commence a burn to pull pressure off of them. We have no heat shield here, remember. So without a heat shield, things could get potentially spicy. No doubt about that. But we need to slow down by about 1 kilometer per second here. Which is easy enough with aerobraking, as long as we don't burn anything off. And of course, we're going to want to be very careful about where we land on Lathe. We don't want to land in water, is the thing. But for this test, it doesn't really matter. Okay, we're drifting off of the retrograde node. I'm going to burn now to slow us down and to hold us in the retrograde attitude. Cool. So it looks like it's going to stay dark, which is unfortunate. I was hoping that it would become light at some point, but no such luck. It looks like it's going to remain dark for this, but it also looks like this is going to be relatively safe. We've slowed down nicely here. We can extend these landing legs, not that it really matters. We're going to be landing in a sea, I'm sure. Without aiming that, that's pretty likely. But yeah, we've definitely slowed down dramatically here. 1,200 meters per second. And continuing to burn. But I just want to make sure, I'm 95% certain that this will be fine. We can drop the burn at this point. We're going to aerodynamically tumble a bit, but we're slow enough that that doesn't really matter. This is actually good for us. That'll slow down further. And drogues are now out-ish. I know it's hard to see. It's really hard to see. But that's drogues out. So we're definitely going to want to come down on the day side. That's very clear. Very, very clear. So let's physics warp forward here. The mains are going to be out now. There we go. And this should be more than enough parachute to land this thing, realistically. Again, it's very dark here, and I understand that. I apologize for that. It definitely would have been better if we had made it around to the day side, but lesson learned there. There's the chutes deploy. 18 meters per second, huh? So that's coming in pretty fast. With the splashdown, nothing broke. Man, it's dark. Okay, so we're going to revert that back to the vehicle assembly. I think it's pretty clear. 18 meters per second is slightly fast. So we may actually want to bring a few extra chutes. Okay, noted. So for right now, I think that's going to be the plan. We're going to skip Tylo for the moment. We should create a custom lander for Tylo. Just because that gravity is so much higher. Like, out of curiosity, what is the gravity of some of the other planets that we've landed on? Like, Duna and Eve both had higher gravity. Like, Duna isn't that high of gravity, right? I think Tylo is more gravity than Duna. But Duna had an atmosphere, so did Eve. We can use both of those to our advantage to land on, right? Is Tylo the hardest powered landing required in the system? I don't know. I want to double check that real quick. That's interesting to me. So, of course, there's Moho, which Moho has no kind of atmosphere, obviously, but 0.27 G. Yeah, that's not much. And then there's Dress out over here, which has 0.1 G. That's even less. And then Elu has 0.1 G as well, so that same design will work for Elu. So yeah, actually, Tylo is the hardest landing here. We're going to need a custom landing system designed for Tylo. That's very clear. It's going to need to have some extra fuel. And it's going to need to have a lot more thrust to weight, which is going to be really interesting. I think for right now, we're going to need to get our mission to Lathe done. We'll come back to Tylo in a bit, I think. But yeah, there's some decisions made. That's excellent. Let's get this built. We're going to want... Okay, so let's open up our long-range communications machine is the base that we're going to build this off of. So it's going to be this. But we're going to ditch this up here. We do not need this relay antenna, although we're going to need an antenna, and it'll need to be a relatively beefy one. So it doesn't need to be a relay antenna, but definitely like a communitron, right? 15G is probably good enough. It's no 100G, but it'll be fine. We can attach that here. And then on top of this, we want to put our parachutes. So we're going to put 4 Mark 16 XLs, and I'd like to have them be like side-mounted and strapped on here. We could potentially do that with cubic octagonal struts. Do something like this, and then have the parachutes be attached on out here. The idea here, of course, is that they will be detached and mounted at the destination. So now we're going to do 4 radial mount drogue chutes, which appears to be enough to slow us down. And I'm also going to throw in 4 radial mount parachutes, because I didn't like that 18 meter per second number. So we'll do something kind of like this. I mean, honestly, we could have the relay antenna here, and then just leave it in orbit as a communication satellite. That's a potential option. We can just strap this on here, like that. We lose the weight of the Science Junior, which we already removed, but we gain a little bit of weight in the parachutes. Okay, I think that's non-terrible. Mostly. Mostly non-terrible. I do want to grab this and reposition it to be a little bit more solar panel friendly. So something kind of like this. Okay. That should do the trick. We've got enough delta V in this thing to get it to where we want to go, in theory. And we want to take it to lathe and intercept, right? And then there's no real way to, like, hook this up. But I don't think that's necessary. Actually, what we could do here is we could put a telescoping hydraulic cylinder on here along with a Clampotron docking port. That should do the trick. So we would then put on... Realistically, I'd want it to be on top here. That would be the best way to do it. You know what? I think we just park it in orbit, and that'll be good enough. That said, I do want to have some RCS on here for that. We're going to need, like, when we take these parts off, it might have some kick to it and toss this thing away. We're going to need to be able to counteract that, and we're going to need to be able to do some fine steering. So we're going to put a monoprop tank on. And that size is too large. This is about right. Okay, we're going to need to redo our fairing. That's fine, though. So command and control, we'll put some RCS thruster blocks on here. I'm going to do 8. That was 4. Sure. That'll do. Let's turn snapping back on, though. Okay. There we go. That'll do just fine. Let's rebuild our fairing. Delete that. Build the fairing to be up like this. And then it comes in and closes like that. I can't see if that actually worked, but it looks like it did. Cool. So something like this should do the trick. Let's go ahead and make this be the parachute delivery machine. Excellent. Let's save that, and let's launch this thing. We're going to get this thing into orbit, and I'm not sure if I'll take it out there on camera or not. I might just do that off camera. It's going to be very similar to how we got there in the first place, right? We'll see. We'll see. Obviously, we'll attach the parachutes on camera and then do the landing. That'll be fine. But for the time being, I definitely want to get this thing at least into low Kerbal orbit. So let's go. Throttle up, SAS on, and double checking our staging real quick, making sure that nothing broke here. It's a little broken. It's a little bit broken. We're going to need to do something like that. We'll manually stage the fairing. But otherwise, that seems fine. Off we go. Fantastic. So this is a nice and simple delivery. We wouldn't need these side tanks if we weren't going quite so far. But we're going very far indeed. We're going very far indeed. So let's just head on over with our gravity turn here. This seems relatively decent. We'll just lock it onto prograde. Cool. And up we go. So our amount of delta V is increasing right now. I love it. And yes, this should definitely have more than enough delta V to get us where we're going. So we're going to have these side tanks detaching relatively shortly. Here in about 25 seconds. Checking in on our apoapsis height, 30 kilometers. Looks okay. Yep, that definitely looks fine. We're pushing up through the atmosphere nicely. About 8 seconds left until our side tanks detach. This is nice and stable. And there go the side tanks. Fantastic. At this point, we definitely can head over to the horizon and get ourselves as much horizontal speed as possible. There we go. So we'll just park here until 100 kilometers, our standard ascent trajectory. We're going to be ditching our fairing at 50 kilometers. So right about now. Excellent. And we'll hold attitude here until we are at 100 kilometers apoapsis. But this is looking quite good. Cool. So there's 100 kilometer apoapsis. And from here, we're going to circularize. And of course, we don't need to do our circularization maneuver in Joule orbit. We can try to target a lathe encounter on the way from our sun encounter. So that'll be very interesting indeed. Okay, let's go ahead and physics warp here. Oh, before we do that, we should definitely remember to extend our solar panels. Don't want to have this thing run out of energy. Okay. There we go. And now we can warp forward a bit until we reach the apoapsis here. This is in physics warp. There we go. I want regular warp. There we go. Fantastic. Okay. 10 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, mark. And let's circularize. Cool. So we're going to have this burn done in about 15 seconds. This will be more than capable of doing our standard gravity assist from the moon. So that'll be fine. Cool. We're in orbit now. This is good enough. Let's go ahead and plot that gravity assist around the moon real quick. And that'll be around here-ish. Maybe a little later. Probably a little later than this. So we'll set this as our target. Yeah, definitely a little later. Something like that. That'll do. Let's get lined up for that burn. Cool. And let's commence our warp for it. There we go. So this is going to be an escape at 838.2 meters per second. I like it. Not too bad. And then we're still going to need our Julian inclination change, but we're going to try to plot an intercept course directly to lathe. That's going to be the goal here. So we're going to commence this burn in a few seconds. And now. Beautiful. Okay. So this burn will be concluded here in about 20 seconds, of course. And this episode is going a little bit over, but I kind of just want to get our transfer to lathe plotted. We'll see if we can get there by the end of the episode, if I can find one. Hopefully. Hopefully. Okay. This should be good enough. Yeah, this is good enough. Excellent. So let's go ahead and warp to here. Now we can see that we had a little bit of a change when we started our warp. There we go. Just a very, very small radial burn there, doing the trick and getting that back. So let's go ahead and warp up over here. Nice. And from here, of course, once we've loaded into the moon's sphere of influence, we're going to be saying goodbye to the moon. Thank you for your gravity. Farewell. And off we go. So we're going to load back into the Kerbal sphere of influence here. And then, of course, we're going to leave the Kerbal system. So we're going to head out over this direction. That's in a year. That's in 12 days. So that'll do. And, of course, we set Jewel as our target. We're going to need to do our inclination change. The descending node will be around here. And let's just get that set up. There we go. That'll do. We'll align to this maneuver node. And as soon as we are out of the Kerbal system here, which we're not yet, then we are going to stop this warp. Okay, we're going to stop the warp, and we're going to warp here, which will be a much faster warp. Cool. So we've got about 60 days to warp. Nice little transitive Kerbal there. I like it. And let's go ahead and stop this warp slightly early because we are not angling the correct direction. So let's get lined up here. There we go. And let's go ahead and warp again. Beautiful. So we'll get the inclination change done, and then I want to try to map out a lathe encounter here before we end this episode. 4, 3, 2, 1, and mark. Excellent. Okay, this should do the trick. Yes, indeed. So, let's see what we can find for an encounter. We'll add a maneuver, I don't know, somewhere over here. This is probably wildly wrong. Yeah, it's going to need to go this direction, isn't it? Actually, that's pretty close. Okay, what does that encounter look like? Actually, that's really close. Okay, let's try bringing that in a little bit. We're going to need to even out the trajectory here, although... Ooh, that's a little spicy. That's a lot spicy, actually. We'll bring that back around. Incredibly spicy there. Okay. So, I want to set lathe as our target here. And I want to push this out... Not that far. Bring it back in. Okay. That's actually a pretty close encounter there. We can probably fine-tune this. Okay. So something along the lines of this. Potentially bringing that in. We're going to need to take this. Ooh, that's sensitive. That's very sensitive. Okay. Just trying to fine-tune this a little bit here. I think the timing might be ever so slightly wrong. Oh, there we go. That's a lathe encounter. It's not a great lathe encounter, but it is a lathe encounter. Can we fine-tune it from here? This is going to be retrograde from our existing orbit. So we definitely want to bring this over, not like that, but rather over this direction. Okay. So it's very, very low, right? There's no doubt about that. I'm not sure how much we can really do about it, though. This is basically a polar orbit here. Indeed. That is basically a polar orbit. And this is so sensitive, I've now lost it. Okay. So obviously, this is the problem, right? So we could potentially correct that with a burn up over this direction. Something like this would be the way to go. And then pulling this in... Something kind of like that. would be similar to what we're trying to do. And then we need a braking burn here, but that should be reasonably fine. What would that burn end up being? This one is 232 meters per second. And then this burn here for the braking burn is going to be quite a bit. Okay, that's a lot. Is this too much? I think this is probably too much. I mean, that gets us to where we want to be, but at what cost? Yikes. Yeah, that's 6,700, so that's definitely too much. We're coming in really, really fast here. I think the better way to do this would be to bring this in. Actually, to modify this. Bring it in. More like this, almost. So really, we'd be looking to circularize around lathe here, right? So this would be coming in more along the lines of here. We'd want to match the inclination if we could, but that'll be a little bit awkward for sure. Ooh, that's sensitive. Okay. That's really sensitive. So we would do something kind of like this, and then we would do a braking burn here. Something kind of like that. Which, that's a much cheaper braking burn. And then we would match inclination with lathe and do our intercept. That stuff I think is going to happen off camera, but we have a path to do this now. So that'll be fine. You can leave your offerings to the engagement gods in the form of likes, comments, subscribes, and bell ringings, and a very special thank you to all of the channel members for making this video possible, including ALS Gamer, Kentuin, James, Shadowwolf, Mlohan80, Kentogan, Nick Smarty, Dimitri H, Punching the Microphone, Spartan News, Unisil, Rogue Corvid, and all the rest. And of course, you. Thank you for watching. If you'd like to support the channel, you can click the join button down below the video. And as always, I will see you all next time.